Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Fellowship of Fandom, the Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power after show brought to you by Agents of Fandom. Today, I am your host, TJ, aka Fat Thor, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Zen, from the Listen 3000 podcast. And today, we have a special friend joining the Fellowship today. We are joined by Ron, who is the host of The Pod Awakens, the Fantasy Poke podcast, and the Infinity Saga and Beyond. Ron, my friend, how are you doing? Welcome to the Fellowship.
Thank you both for having me. It's great to be here. You know, TJ, you and I have been kind of Twitter buddies for a while now, so it's really cool to get the chance to chat. And it's, getting the chance to meet you, Zen, has also been really cool as well. So excited to break down a very crazy episode with you today and just kind of get to riff.
Yeah, and what an episode to have you guest on, dude, because this episode was nuts. And we joke about it all the time. Like, I am not a harsh critic. And literally, people go back. I challenge you, go back to every episode. I think every episode, I'm like, oh, this is the best one yet. Oh, this is the best one yet. But wow, this was a crazy episode. So I'm so glad we got you in here for today. But we just got to get it started. We have a lot of things to talk about. Again, crazy packed episode this week, even though we didn't even get to everybody. But to start it off, let's go over just overall thoughts of the episode. I've already pretty much said what I think of this episode. But Ron, as our guest today, I'm going to throw it off to you first. What did you think of episode 7, Rings of Power, Doomed to Die?
Well, I'm going to echo your sentiment there. I wouldn't say I'm a harsh critic, but I'm, let me think how to put it. Cause I also know it doesn't take a lot to impress me, but I also just think like with Lord of the Rings in particular, such a high standard was set that I guess I just kind of judge things semi-harshly. Harshly is even the bad way to put it, but just, I guess, cause the movies meant a lot to me that I really have a high standard. With that said, I do think this was the best episode of the series so far. I think this one and episode 6 of last season, like when Mordor finally gets formed and all that, were the two that really in themselves like felt like their own condensed Lord of the Rings movie. Like it had everything you could want, the heart, the stakes, the action, like just it felt like even if you hadn't watched Rings of Power at all yet, like you could just consume this episode as a whole with some minimal information going in and still get a lot out of it. So I loved it. I thought it was great. I won't get too much into specifics right now, because we got a lot to talk about today, but 2 thumbs up for me for sure.
I cannot echo you enough, and I think you bring out a great point in the kind of criticism, because way back when, that was like a big criticism that book fans had of the Peter Jackson. And it's like, when you have this vision of something in your head, it's really hard to break that, even if like the thing you're presented with is great. It's like everyone has their like headcanon, right? And I think that's where a lot of criticism of this show comes from, which we don't have to get into all that. But Zen, what did you think of this episode? We were primed up last week, ready to fricking go. Did it deliver for you?
I definitely think it did, man. This was action packed, man, from the beginning to the end. Like it was nonstop, and I had a really good time with this one, man. I definitely think this is like a good. We were talking about like, do we think we're gonna get a bunch of battles with the last 2? And this one definitely delivered on all fronts. So I had a great time with this one.
Yeah, and one thing that we talked about earlier is, like you said, the action, and like the showrunners had promised like, oh, there's going to be a lot of action this season, which the way they were talking about it made it like, I remember one specific quote, they said like a battle takes over weeks, like going on, which I guess technically is 2 weeks, but I'm hoping maybe next year like get like 3-4 episodes like that. I don't know, that would be nuts. But before we move on, just very quickly, Ron, I want to ask you, we like to ask all of our new guests that come on, what's kind of your level of fandom with Lord of the Rings? Obviously, you just said that you're a big fan of the movies, but especially with Lord of the Rings, like there's a deep rabbit hole you can go down. So like, what's like, where are you at on the level? And also like, what are your just like thoughts of Rings of Power in general, like the season so far, just how you like the series in general?
So my Lord of the Rings fandom, like comparatively, I wouldn't put it right at the top of the list, but they are movies that I enjoyed a whole lot as a kid, and it's like we kind of talked about with just the imprint things leave on you. It's always one that like I go back to, and they're very much kind of like a comfort movie thing. Those and the Hobbit movies. Not really big into the source material though, like the Tolkien books and stuff like that. Not for any reason in particular. Just haven't really gotten around to picking them up yet. So
They're
in
dense.
terms of, yeah. So in terms of like the deep lore, I'm not super well faceted, but a diehard movie fan, I would say through and through.
Wonderful. So we have like great three perspectives here: fresh fan, super heckin' nerd, and movie nerd. So this is going to be great. So let's jump into some more specifics of this episode. First off, I want to talk about Celebrimbor because our man has been going through it this season, and it all really comes to a head in this episode. And I want to get your guys' thoughts on this because obviously Sauron has been like manipulating him the whole time. I mean, we've seen this almost every episode now. But I don't know. To me, it felt like this episode like was the first time I really felt like Sauron was being extra like malicious with it, like extra kind of like evil. Like again, he's been influencing him this whole time, but this really felt like just like, oh fuck you, man, right? Like just like really intentional. So Zen, I'll get your thoughts on this first. Did you pick up on that a little bit, or do you think it was typical stuff for Anatar Sauron that we've seen throughout the season, or do you think it was stepped up a little bit?
No, I definitely think it was stepped up a little bit. To me, I got like the vibe that he was getting like kind of fed up with the illusion. Even for himself, it was just like, all right, yo, I'm tired of keeping this up. Just did the rings so we can get this thing going. You know what I mean? I felt like he was just getting tired of Celebrimbor, especially him trying to like going back and forth with it. Oh yeah, I'll do it, and no, I don't want to do it. And yeah, I felt like he was getting fed up.
That's a good point. I didn't really consider him getting like fed up. Ron, what do you think?
Yeah, so all throughout this season so far, I've said this a few times on our show, The Fantasy Folk, as well. There's been a lot of like real life parallels with Anatar and everyone in our lives. We've had a person like a gaslighter in our life. You know what I mean? The person who constantly tries to make you think you're wrong and you're crazy for things. And usually once you figure out beyond a shred of a doubt proof that these people are being untruthful with you, what happens? They get angry, they react, they lash out. And that's basically what I think we saw from him in this episode. He was frustrated that Celebrimbor saw through his lies and was able to realize, no, this isn't me going crazy. This is him making me think I'm going crazy. So I think it was just a really good real world parallel. And I said I gave this episode 2 thumbs up. I don't know if Celebrimbor would do that at the moment. Just me personally, I don't even think he can.
Dude, that was I did not expect him to go there, and I'm so glad they did. That was so awesome. And you bring up a great point, too, with him being a gaslighter, because that brings us perfectly into the next kind of scene where he straight up just takes command over Eregion. He tells everyone, he's like, yeah, Celebrimbor is crazy. Like, he's lost it, dude. So I'm taking charge. And we talked about this last week, again, is risen up Mirdania. I think the way she was looking, I didn't even consider this before this episode, but I think like she like has a thing for him, like romantic, like, she was like looking deep into his eyes. And so again, I think that echoes your point perfectly, Ron, is that he is just, again, we call him the great deceiver, the great gaslighter. Like he is just always telling everyone sweet nothings in their ear. But like you said, Celebrimbor starting to break this illusion, right? And we see this pattern sort of start repeating. And Celebrimbor he puts a little notch on the candle. He starts noticing these patterns, right? And I want to ask you guys this because I don't really know what this means, but I feel like maybe you guys might have a better kind of theory or whatever analysis on it. But we see this mouse going around and around and around. And I feel like there's like a symbolism there with that mouse, right? So I want to ask you, like, what do you guys think that mouse represents in this kind of endless loop? Ron, I'll throw it off to you first.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it with your question there. It represents this endless loop that he's kind of going in right now of his own madness, kind of spiraling, I guess would be a good way to put it. Not knowing what's real and what's not, even after he escapes and he sees Galadriel and he's like, I didn't even know if you were real, sort of thing. So I think it's very much meant to be a visual representation of that spiral, which this show as a whole does really good. Not to jump around too much, but there was another scene later in the episode where the orc army and the elves army are like kind of meeting in the middle, and there's this direct line between them where like the sun and the clouds is, where all the light is on the side of the elves and it's all dark and cloudy and kind of broody over on the orc side. So the show is very good at giving you those sort of physical representations of messages that they're trying to get across. And I think this was just another one of those.
Damn, I'm gonna have to go back and look at that scene because I didn't even pick up on that. But that's awesome. Yeah. Zen, what do you think? Do you have another read on this mouse and the kind of symbolism of it?
I mean, both of y'all hit that on the nail on the head with that. I feel like I agree with the symbolism of it, like going in the cycle in the circle. You know what I mean? Like him kind of just losing it, and seeing how he reacts later in the episode, it just adds more credence to that. You know what I mean?
It also, not to cut you off, TJ, it also kind of reminds me a little bit of maybe sort of physical representation of like Sauron, because what happens? He gets killed, he comes back. He gets killed, he comes back. Round and round we go. So that could just be another like little subtle nod they threw in there.
I like that. Like evil always comes around, whether it's Morgoth, Sauron, like it's always coming around. I really like that. And I just immediately thought like that's Celebrimbor, like that represents him. But kind of piggybacking off of that, I kind of just thought of this while we were talking. Do you guys think that was part of Sauron's deception? Like that he purposely put it on a loop to fuck with Celebrimbor? Or do you think that Celebrimbor just kind of caught on to it? Like, you get what I'm trying to say? Like, was the repetition intentional to make him kind of go more crazy, or was it just in repetition? And again, Celebrimbor again just kind of caught on to it. Zen, what do you think?
Messing with Sauron, man, you never know. I feel like that could have been part of his plan because it all kind of worked out for him. Like him, like Celebrimbor, losing it himself, and then him influencing everybody else around him that he is losing it as well. You know what I mean? Because you see how Mirdania and even the soldiers and stuff were like looking at him like, yo, I think he's going a little crazy.
He did sound crazy though. He's like the mouse.
Yeah, he did.
The mouse.
No favors. Yeah.
Yeah.
For real. Yeah, like Sorry, what was the exact question again?
So, like, the repetition and, like, when Celebrimbor notices the mouse. Was that did Sauron intentionally want him to see that to make him think he's going crazier? Or do you think Celebrimbor just kind of got wise to the game?
I think the latter for sure. I think that it was, just kind of like a D&D spell. You know what I mean? It's like this major image that Celebrimbor puts up, and there's limitations to, that Anatar puts up. And there's limitations to how much you can do to that, where it's, it's more of a projection, an illusion, as opposed to reality. So I think it was just a way to show that, or I guess a moment to give Celebrimbor to kind of reclasp onto his sanity. You know what I mean? To be like, okay, I've seen some crazy stuff and I've been misled and gaslit for all this time, but I know that this is BS. You know what I mean? Beyond a shadow of a doubt. So I think it was thrown in there for that, to give him a chance to sort of reclaim a shred of his sanity, I guess.
100%. And kind of, again, piggybacking off kind of the same theme here, with Sauron's kind of motivations, and like, is he being more truthful than he is being deceitful in some areas? And specifically, I'm talking about when he tells Celebrimbor basically is like, dude, thank you, man. Like, you took care of everything. Like, you're the man. And Anatar's like, I'm sad. Like, our time is coming to an end, and like, the work is almost finished, but like, it kind of sucks, right? So again, do you guys think, I don't know, I kind of feel like he was being a little truthful in that sentiment, and like he really is gonna miss this time, like while he's like torturing this dude for his own pleasure. I think, like you said, he was kind of being truthful. So I wanted to get your guys' read on that again. Do you think Sauron had a little truth in there, or again, just this was all part of him continuously, like, again, risen up Celebrimbor, influencing him? Ron, what do you think?
I think he was being truthful in his own, like, egotistical way. Like, it wouldn't shock me for 1 second if in his mind he, like, legitimately believes, like, be damned all the destruction that I'm doing and all the chaos that I'm causing. These people should be thankful for me because I am going to eventually rule over them and bring them the peace. Or I forget the exact line he uses in this episode, but like he is so like smelling his own farts that it's like he legitimately like he legitimately feels that these people should have reverence for him and vice versa. Because of that, he holds this weird kind of abusee reverence for them as well.
Zen, do you think that he was being truthful or just all part of him manipulating Celebrimbor, raising him up a little bit?
See, I was thinking it was just him raising him up, but Ron, you had some great points with that. I think I'm leaning towards him, actually telling some of that truth there, because what we've learned about Sauron throughout this show, that it just makes a lot of sense that he starts to believe his own lies. You know what I mean? So like, I definitely could see him actually telling some of that truth and being honest with him.
100%, Ron, you nailed it on the head. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And I really quickly, I want to just throw out this quote because I'm the book nerd here. And I think this kind of sheds a lot of light, and we see this a lot in Charlie Vickers' performance, specifically when he's talking to Celebrimbor about like when he reveals himself and like you said about saving Middle Earth. So in a letter to Walt Waldman from Tolkien, he kind of describes a little bit more of Sauron's motivations. And he says that as opposed to Morgoth, who wanted to destroy the world, Sauron didn't object to the world existing just as long as he could do what he wanted to do with it. And he kind of alludes to this when he's talking about his torture from Morgoth to Celebrimbor. And he also says that Sauron still had relics of positive purpose that descended from the good nature in which he began. And that after the War of Wrath, he saw the desolation of the world, and he said in his heart that the Valar had forgotten Middle-earth, and that with his power, he was going to bring order and balance back to the world. So I think, again, that really exemplifies Sauron in this episode, and which is, we got to talk about, we're just going to stick on Sauron and Celebrimbor for a little bit here, but Charlie Vickers' performance. Oh my, we have been talking about it almost every episode, but this one, like his facial acting, like when he tells Celebrimbor, like when Celebrimbor's like, you like no emissary from the Valar would do this, his face switches like on a dime. And it's like, oh shit, he's Sauron right now. So just like, I'm not the only one here, right? Like Charlie Vickers is amazing, and Charles Edwards too. Like them together, I mean, so good.
Yeah,
I'll throw it out to whoever wants to speak first.
Yeah, their chemistry is amazing. And what's good about Charlie Vickers, and I'm sure this is equal parts his talent and direction in terms of how they're telling him to play the character, he's so stoic and calm and cool and collected most of the time that when that mask does slip a little bit, it feels like it means so much more. And it's like, ooh, you got a nerve there on him. You know what I mean? And I think that by not having him be this like verbose, flamboyant kind of out there, grandiose kind of character, that it makes those moments mean a lot more. And I really appreciate that in the character in this show.
Yeah, and I think a great moment of that is like when they're talking about the hammer, and he's like, you know how forgetful you can be, like he's like almost like kind of sweet about it, right? Like, Zen, what do you think?
Man, I'm right there with you, man. Charlie Vickers been doing a great job this show, and again, like I'm just piggybacking off of the chemistry that they have. I feel like they kind of been. I know, it's a lot of characters on the show, but like I feel like this has been a lot of centralized on them throughout this season so far. Like it's been a lot with Celebrimbor and Sauron throughout this show, and I feel like this was just a great scene. And I had to like double check, like, oh, I forgot this is the second to the last episode, because so much stuff was happening. And like that reveal there, I'm like, dang, are we already getting a reveal? But like, oh, it makes sense. We're about to end the season off. So he did a great job, man. I want to see him in more stuff after this, because like he's doing a great job at Sauron for sure.
Let the Marvel fan casts begin.
Yes,
that's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking.
MCU as fast as we can. Yeah, because he's amazing. I'm a little ignorant. I don't know if he's been in other work before this. I'm sure that he has, but I'm not aware of it. But yeah, this has to make him a star, because I think he is incredible. Again, Charles Edwards is great. I know he's done a lot of like musical work, but like we talked about, Sauron reveals himself to Celebrimbor, and R.I.P. our girl Mirdania. She does not make it, unfortunately. Which is like, I know how this story goes, so I don't know why I was surprised at this, but I still was. I was like, oh my god, they killed her, and not only did they kill her, but like kind of brutally too. Like we were talking about, Celebrimbor's like going crazy. He's like, oh my god, he's Sauron trying to tell everybody, and they're like, dude, you are nuts. And Sauron does a little flick of the wrist, and Mirdania is gone. Zen, we've talked about Mirdania quite a bit on this show, actually. So were you sad? Were you upset that
Bro, I
Mirdania,
was
or were
so
you
shocked.
expecting that?
I was shocked. No, I was I was not expecting that. When it happened, I was like, all right, yeah, something's gonna happen. She's gonna live. Then she hit the ground. I'm like, oh, they doing this. Okay. All right. No, this is the end of the season for sure. Like we about to start getting rid of people. But yeah, I was super shocked at that. And it was crazy that she was just a casualty to Sauron. Like he rizzed her up the whole season just to let her go just like that. Like it was crazy how expendable she was to him, you know?
Dude,
And it's
that was
Just
funny,
to prove a
girl.
point. Yeah.
there was a split second there where like she gets thrown off the roof and like she lands and it's like, oh no, she's dead. Oh wait, no, she's still alive, but really her, oh no, she's dead. So like,
that's what I mean. Like they like
thwarted.
went. Not only did they throw her off, but then they had like they showed the orc with the axe coming down. It was like, dude, yeah.
There
Go
was a
ahead.
split second. There was just a split second where I was like, oh, maybe they're gonna play it like, she somehow survives these grave injuries, but she saw Sauron do this, and like maybe that's gonna be what turns her against the elves. And oh, never mind, she's dead. Like it was just this whole thing that just in the course of like 10 seconds just came and went.
Yeah, and again, that totally took me by surprise. There's a lot of things in this episode that kind of took me by surprise, and I thought it, like you said, super well executed. And I think Mirdania, unfortunately, was the perfect character for this to happen to, because it's like, I mean, I know Zen, you're new to all of this, but we all know like Elrond and Galadriel will make it. Like we know they're in the movie. So it's like even when things are very tense with them, like at the end of the day, we know they got plot armor. And I think Mirdania, they played it really well where we kind of built a relationship with her very slightly through these couple episodes. So when her death did come, I'm sure a lot of people felt like me. I was like, no, like, that sucks, dude.
Yeah. I also don't think it's a coincidence that they made her look like Galadriel, like when in building this relationship with Anatar, to where I don't want to say it almost makes it mean more to him because she's like a spitting image of her when he has to throw her off the roof, or doesn't have to, but ends up throwing her off the roof like that. But I think it was definitely an intentional choice for sure.
I 100% agree. And we talked about last week, like the significance of him comparing her to Galadriel, because she is like known amongst the elves as like even more beautiful than your typical elf. And I want to just shout out really quickly. So Mirdania is played by Amelia Kenworthy. Great time in that show. I think she did it again. While we only got a little bit of her, I think she did a great job with making us care about her. And so when that did happen, it really did feel it. And we'll get back to Celebrimbor and Sauron a little bit later. There's a couple other points I want to talk about, but we got to talk about the dwarves. I love the dwarves. We talk about, again, I feel like people, which again, some criticism is silly, but a lot of people I feel like are like not really too keen on like the stranger and the dwarf storylines, but those are some of my favorite. And we get one of, I think, my favorite scenes of the season this year. And so the King Durin is continuously just going deeper into that greed, as we've talked about in previous episodes, ordering the dwarves to dig. But we finally get a reunion with Durin and Elrond. They sneak Elrond into Khazad-dûm, and they have just a really great little reunion. Their friendship played a huge role in the first season of this show. So I just want to, how good was it seeing Durin and Elrond together, even though it was like some very dire circumstances? And I'll throw it off to you.
Yeah, man, it was dope. And again, just noting their chemistry with those two actors there. Every time they on screen together, I know like some of the stuff from last season and this season as well. Like I always have a great time. Just their dynamic. You got the dwarf, and he got what the dwarves bring and their background, and you got this elf, and just the contrast, because we don't get a lot of them, the dwarves and the elves, communicating with each other. So like just that little bit, I loved it. Every time they link up, I'm always a fan.
Yeah, they've got that kind of like brotherly relationship where they kind of make fun little digs at each other. Even in this episode, they did it in what was a very serious moment. They kind of give you a little bit of levity there with the going back and forth. But it was also really bittersweet, to fast forward to the end of the episode where he thinks he's going to have his back, and Elrond probably feels really betrayed in that moment. But as we saw, and as we will definitely see next week, Durin didn't really have a choice. Like, as they said, Khazad-dûm would not be there if he had left. Although it's looking like that's going to be the case anyway, judging by the preview for next week. So, but yeah, it was great seeing them back. I love the dwarf stuff. It's great. Durin and Disa are like two of my top 5 characters in the show easily. They make me smile anytime they're on screen, and like seeing Prince Durin get to have his like lead the charge moment tonight, and getting everybody on his side and all that stuff. I can't get enough of the dwarf stuff. So,
dude, that speech, I was like, yes, Doom. Like, that was awesome, man. That got me so hyped. Like, it reminded me, which I know, like, people probably freak out at this comparison because people love the movie so much, but it really reminded me of King Theoden's speech before the Battle of Helm's Deep, when he's like, ride, like, oh, it just like got me so hyped. I was so pumped. I love that so much. Zen, were you as pumped as I was? Did you jump out of your seat at that?
Nah, for sure, bro. Durin's energy, man. Always throughout the season, he's one of my favorite characters. But the energy he brings, man, is like second to none. Like, he brought it in that scene, and it just made so much sense. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I love what he's bringing for that performance. The actor, he's doing a great job.
Yeah, like Ron said, Disa and Durin are some of my favorite. I honestly would love just like a spin-off of them, like just like dwarves doing dwarf shit. Like, I would love that. And one really quick point I want to bring up, because we got to get to some other things. But so when Durin is giving his little speech, he mentions how Sauron stole the smithing secrets from their forebears. And so I just wanted to bring this up very quickly. What he means by that is basically the god of the Valar of the smiths. His name is Aul, or Owl, however you pronounce that. And Sauron, before he was with Morgoth, was actually a disciple of him, and he learned how to do smithing, and that's how he knows so much about making the rings and imbuing his own power into them. So he worked under him, and not only that, but Aul, however I am going to mispronounce it this whole time, but they say that he was but they say that he was actually one of the Valar that was most like Morgoth, in the sense that he desired to create things of his own as well. And that's actually where the dwarfs come from. He made them without the approval of God, the big God. So that's also why the dwarves and the elves kind of have inherent beef with each other. But yeah, so that's, I just thought that was interesting how he brought that up. And again, just kind of give a little bit more context. So again, that's why Sauron is so good at making rings and shit. Like, he was taught by the smith god, basically. So again, that also, I think, kind of gives a little bit more oomph to Durin's speech as well, because like the dwarves have very strong beef with Sauron. Like, he stole their shit. He's kind of just flaunting it around, using the teachings of Owl, who, you know, should be used for good, and he's using it for evil. So I really love that little shout out, little Easter egg for everyone out there. But sticking kind of with the dwarves, but again, going back to Celebrimbor and Sauron, this is something that we talked about last week and kind of got confirmed this week, is the powdered mithril. So last episode, Sauron gives Celebrimbor this powdered mithril in order to finish the 9 rings. But then when he reveals himself and breaks the illusion, we see that mithril is actually his blood. Something that we talked about last week, Zen. What did you...
You called it. Yes, let's
go. Which, I'll be fair, I saw someone mention that on Twitter. And like that. So like, I didn't originate that theory, but... like I said, we talked about that last week. We're like, dude, he cut his hand. Where the hell did he get this? Like, this powdered mithril just fucking appears out of nowhere. So Zen, were you like that Leo meme pointing at the screen when that happened?
Nah, it definitely was, man. And it's like, it goes back to what we were talking about last episode. Like, it makes so much sense, like him putting some of himself in the rings and like that whole thing. It just gets crazy, bro. Like, yeah, you called that for sure. I was like thinking that old time watch. I'm like, damn, yeah, Thor, he was on it.
Like I said, I can't take all the credit for that one. But Ron, what were you like? Oh my god! Were you even on that theory train? Did you see that as well, or maybe picked up on that last episode?
It surprised me to the point where even this is funny. Even while it was happening, I was still like, "So what is that?" Like when he held his hand, I thought it was like ink, and then I was like, "So why does he have the ink all over his hand?" And then I was like, "Wait a minute, okay, now it makes a lot of sense." So yeah, that one caught me totally by surprise, but it was a cool thing to see.
So I want to ask you guys this too, because maybe this is just one of my thoughts that I had, but so after seeing it, I think that it was just like his blood, purely his, like he just illusioned it into looking like Mithril. But when I first saw it, I originally thought like he mixed his blood with the Mithril. So I just want to get your guys' thought. Do you guys think he mixed it with Mithril, or it was just purely his blood?
I think he mixed it because they needed the Mithril to keep the rings bonded, correct? Like when they created the first ones, essentially the missing ingredient to make it all work was the Mithril. So I think that there is still the powdered Mithril in there, because trying to think, do we see him actually get it in Khazad-dûm? Or is there like a reference to him or no at all, right?
Well, so that's why I'm questioning it, because before that, the last scene we see is Anatar meeting with King Durin, and that's when he straight up says no. He's like, I'm not giving you any. And then all of a sudden, he comes out with this, again, not only Mithril, but like we've never seen powdered Mithril. So it's like King Durin said no, but then all of a sudden was like, oh, let me give you this special one that we have never even used yet. That's why I'm like, I'm questioning myself if it was mixed or just his blood. Zen, what do you think it was a mix or a pure, straight up, pure Sauron blood?
Pure Sauron. Nah, I think it was a mix. It makes sense
all
for
organic.
The rings to all organic Sauron. Nah, it makes sense for it to be a mix, just for the integrity of the rings itself. You know what I mean? I agree with that.
Yeah, I think it could really go either way, because like you guys said, they kind of describe the Mithril as what you like kind of brings the power, if you would, like gives it that juice, that sauce. Yeah. But I think you could also, though, the other school of thought, which I think also makes sense, is that, again, we kind of talk about how the rings of men are especially evil, like among even the other rings, because Sauron had so much influence over them. So I think the other school of thought could make sense as well, is that these rings are the only ones that have no Mithril in them, and they're just his blood, which is why they are so much more corrupting than the other. Like, while the other ones are still corrupting, because we talked about too how we saw him whisper those sweet nothings into that little piece of Mithril when they made the dwarf rings, so it has some of his influence. But again, I think you could go either way on that, which I wouldn't say anyone's wrong on either way. I think it could be either a mix or just pure blood, but either way, this basically confirms like what I'm saying, is that's why the rings of men are so evil, and like, for lack of a better word, and that even comes into the name of this episode. Name of this episode is Doomed to Die, which comes from the famous ring verse, 3 rings for the elven kings, 7 for the dwarf lords, and 9 rings for men doomed to die, is basically how that goes. And so yeah, I thought that was a really great, like, kind of switcheroo, the little table turn on all of us, and again just adds all of this that we've been talking about, that like everything has been according to Sauron's plan. Even things that kind of seem random are not random in all reality, which brings us perfectly into our next point. Ron, you alluded this a little bit, but again, just awesome scenes of the elves come to battle. They show up to Eregion. Orcs they're coming together, and then they stop. They see Galadriel is still prisoner, which we talked about last week with Adar, and then we get a scene with Adar and Elrond, and basically Adar gives him the same proposal. You give me the ring, we use the crown, kill Sauron, boom, we're good, like, awesome. And Elrond's not having it, of course. I mean, Elrond has been very steadfast this whole season in what he's doing. But big kind of thing, which if you guys have been following along with like the press stuff like this, Morfydd Clark actually teased a kiss this season. And we find out that that kiss is between Elrond and Galadriel. And so I have some thoughts on this, but I'm going to throw it off to you guys first. So what were your thoughts on this kiss? Forced, makes sense. Do you guys think it was romantic kiss, or do you think it was just for the purpose of giving her that brooch? So we also see, if you watch that scene closely, before he goes and talks to Galadriel, he takes the brooch off of his little collar, and then while he kisses her, you can see him slip it into her hand. So if you're really keen-eyed, you can catch that. So again, do you guys think it's romantic or just trying to get her to escape? Ron, I'll throw it to you.
Sure. So I don't think it was romantic. I think it was very much strategic. And I think if it was meant to be a romantic thing, it would have been something we saw in the trailers for this season to kind of prep us for that being like one of the central story things they're going to be going with going forward. Because that, I mean, if they ended up doing a romance angle between those two, that would be one of the biggest things going on in this show. So it would seem like it would be something you would throw in there as a tease, you know, to get people excited for this season. But I think what they didn't want to do was throw it in there and have everyone think that was going to be the case and just essentially have it be a red herring kiss. You know what I mean? Like not really something that's going to matter in the end. So I think it was very much just a strategic thing. Easy for me to say. And I hope that's the case too, because I do think it would feel a little forced if they just decided to throw them two together just because. I feel like it would feel a little out of place.
Yeah, I agree. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, ooh, people are going to be mad. People are going to be mad at this. Zen, what did you think? Do you think, again, strategic, romantic, and do you think it was kind of forced?
Maybe a little bit of both. Me coming with no background from the movies or anything like that. Just watching this season and like just their dynamic throughout the show so far. I did feel like it could have been something there. You know what I mean? Maybe like even if you look at her face afterwards, she did look extremely shocked. Like yo, what is going on? What are you doing? But they haven't really touched on any of that throughout the show. So like I could see where people could feel like it could be forced. And I don't know anything about like I do know they're gonna survive this show. I don't know their relationship past this in the movie, so I don't know if there's anything to this past that, but I'm assuming it's not. So yeah, I mean, I feel like it could have been either way, but you know.
Yeah, see, I think. Oh, go ahead, Ron. Go.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, kind of like in the same the relationship that Durin and Elrond have. It feels like a brother sister thing so far with them in the show. So that was why I was like, I don't know, that feels a little out of place.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Ron. I totally think, at least in my opinion, I think that they're just very good friends. Like they share a deep love for each other, but I don't know. I'm always I wouldn't say a fan, but I'm always like kind of a proponent of, I always think like movies don't often show good representations of like platonic love, and like two people can just be like very deep, close friends, and again, have love for each other. But love doesn't always have to be romantic. And like, I think a lot of movies, unfortunately, will take like a really good, strong like friendship or bond, and like it has to be romantic. And so what I took from this is I don't think it was romantic, like, oh, he likes her, right? I think, again, like, yes, they love each other and they have like a very deep friendship and very deep connection to each other. But I think Elrond was just trying to give her a means to escape. Like he wasn't, like, again, like, ooh, I like you, I'm gonna take my opportunity, right? And again, like they just have a very deep, long history with each other. I mean, when they allude to this in season 1, when Elrond's parents die, Galadriel kind of doesn't take him in, but like they just grew very close to each other. Galadriel was actually I guess you could say student or protege is probably a better word, of Elrond's mother. And so like they're just very, very close. And really quickly, little quick Easter egg, Adar mentions Melian, who is part of Elrond's family. I think would be great grandmother, I guess, and she is a Maya, which is the same as Sauron, Gandalf the Wizards, very powerful. So that is what he was talking about when he says like, "Oh, you have the light of your forebear," like basically telling him again, kind of risen him up like Sauron is, right? Like, oh, dude, you're awesome. But that quick little Easter egg there. But then we see Galadriel escape. And this is something that we also kind of talked about a little bit. We've seen glimpses of these things throughout the season, but we see she when she's escaping, she comes across an orc funeral. And I thought that this was really interesting because we've again talked about how this season has kind of been humanizing the orcs a little bit more, giving them a little bit more autonomy. And to see that they have funerals for their dead, I again, like from what we've seen, it shouldn't be that shocking because they have kids and stuff like that. But I was really surprised at that, and I just thought that was a really great touch to again further that point of the orcs having a little humanity in that. So, Ron, what did you think of that? Have you been picking up on that this season? I know some people were like upset about that, which is the conversation we had last time. But what do you think of the orc families and the orc funerals? Are you enjoying that?
Yeah, I was cool with it. People will find a reason to get mad about anything, so I've kind of let that ship sail out
Yeah.
into sea. Yeah, I really enjoy it. We also kind of saw that sort of, I guess, humanity in the orcs, which is kind of a weird way to put it, but we see that sort of lead them to start to question Adar a bit in this episode too, where it's like, you said that we're your children and you're essentially throwing us out there as cannon fodder. Like, what's the deal? So I think it adds a lot of depth to the orc storyline as a whole, to where it's not just Adar being a figurehead and whatever says goes. I mean, that is kind of what's going on, but we're going to start to see that pushback now, and that wouldn't be there if it was just a bunch of mindless orcs, like we've seen in the movies and stuff. So I think it adds some color into the outline of the orc character that we've come to know so far, I think would be the way I would put it.
100%. Zen, what did you enjoy the orc funeral? Again, this is something that we talked about with Rose in our previous episode about the humanization of orcs.
Yeah, man. With this being also my first, you know, dealings with the orcs within this franchise and stuff like that. I mean, I see what you mean as far as the humanization of them. You know what I mean? That's the great thing about shows like this, where you can flesh more characters out and flesh more dynamics out than you could in a movie, where they kind of just probably had to write them off as just these villains and these mindless things to throw at the main characters. You know what I mean? But this here, they can kind of get into little things and make them more complex and more dynamic, which I think is a dope thing. Because even in the show, like how they talk, how they speak on orcs is crazy. Because everybody always treats them as lower beings. You know what I mean? So just to find out that they aren't just as simple as you think they are is dope. You know.
Agreed. And I can't find the actor name right now. I was just looking for it. But shout out Glug, man. Our boy Glug, who's Adar's like right hand man. Like you were saying, Ron, he's like kind of questioning him in this episode. Again, shout out that dude. He's doing a great job. And I'm sure like under all that makeup and stuff, that's super hard. But he is really killing it, I think. Like talking about like Charlie Vickers and like the facial acting and stuff. I think he really can portray a lot of emotion, even though again he's full of prosthetics. So shout out to our boy Glug. But we're running out of time here, and we haven't even talked about the battle, baby. Oh my god, this was awesome. Again, it really satisfied me in every way possible. The kind of sour taste we were left with House of the Dragon, no shade there, but this delivered, man. I loved it. We see Elrond, Arondir, Gil-galad, they're teaming up, taking down trolls. We get some of the troll Damrod, who we were introduced to from promotional materials. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on here, but just like, what were you guys as satisfied with this as I was, or am I just am I a Rings of Power shill? Is the internet right about me? Ron, what did you think? Did this hit all the right notes for you?
Oh yeah, without question. There was a quote from the writers or somebody where they said like the last 3 episodes of this season, like it felt like a battle that took place over 3 episodes. So when we didn't get any of that last week, I was like, but I think this definitely made up for it. I love how creative this show is with some of their action like set pieces. Like there was one moment in particular in when the orc kills Elrond's horse, and they're like going back and forth, and he slices the throat or whatever of the orc, and it falls back on the catapult, and then it just gets launched forward into the wall. Like who thinks of that? But it's such a great idea.
Good.
It's just such a creative thing to throw in to make it not just feel like your generic lock, stock, and barrel fantasy battle army. You know what I mean? It felt like there was a lot of individual kind of stuff inside of it. It was also good to see Arondir get a little bit of shine. He's kind of been on the back burner a little bit this season just because the actress who played Bronwyn had to leave, and they had to shuffle a lot of stuff around with his character as a result. But it was good to finally see him get like some real shine in this episode as well. So battle delivered for me, and then some. 2 thumbs up, like I said.
R.I.P. our boy. We talked about Ismael Cruz Cordova is probably. I've said this about like basically everybody, but he is so good. Like,
is he really done? You think he's really done?
I don't think he's dead. Yeah.
You think he's alive? I was gonna ask you guys that at the end, but let's go through it. So what do you guys think? Dead, alive?
Yeah,
I think he's alive.
Yeah, both alive.
Yeah, I think Gil-galad's still alive too. I don't think unless I missed, there was a shot of him being like definitively dead. But usually when they're killing somebody in one of these shows, like they don't throw it in the background. You know what I mean? It's going to be something. There's like a minute of like the close up on their face and the "I'm so sorry." You know what I mean? Whatever their last kind of moments are. So yeah, I think they're both still alive.
Yeah, Gil-galad for sure alive, and I think Arondir's alive for sure. But I just thought it would be fun to put is he dead? Right? But and also speaking of people who don't make it, R.I.P. Rianne. Awesome scene from her.
Yes.
Shout out Selena Liu who plays Rianne. Wow, that was good. I mean, we're talking how good this battle was. I think what really makes it great is the tension, and man, was that scene tense. It's Elrond, Rianne, and a couple other elves. They're rushing the gate, and she gets the Boromir send off, just pelted with arrows, but she's still able to get at the last minute. So that I mean, she was awesome. Shout out to her. Do you guys have any other thoughts on Rianne in that scene?
Yeah, she was just really cool, man. And the way that when she fires off that arrow and you kind of see it going through the air and like time stops almost. It was just, it felt like it was like the turning point. It was really, really cool. Really well done.
It was like a shot clock moment, man.
Yeah,
arrow went up. It's like, hold up, is it going? Is it going?
Dude. Yeah, I thought she was done. I like the first time when he looked back, I'm like, well, there she goes. And when she let off that shot again, it was definitely another cheer moment. I had a lot of cheer moments in this episode, but we're wrapping up on time here. So very quickly at the end of this episode, we get Galadriel saves Celebrimbor. He finally breaks this illusion. He comes out, Galadriel finds him, and finally the guards believe him because of Galadriel. Again, she's very highly regarded among the elves. And what do you got? I see you giggling over there.
No, I'm just like, it took all of that. It just took all of that for them to believe. Like, you seen all this crazy stuff happening, and now it was
she literally said like two things.
Right, and they were like, "Oh yeah, he's not alone." I'm like, "Really? That's all right." Oh, at least y'all here now. At least.
Yeah.
Right?
Eregion has been like literal hell on earth ever since Adar showed up. And just, nope, sorry, don't believe you.
Yeah.
And Galadriel, it's like, all right, you know what? Actually, we all believe you now.
Yeah, there wasn't one person on that Eregion guard or whatever. He's like, ever since this Anatar dude showed up, things have been pretty shitty, right? Like, no one had that thought. But he brings up a really great line that I want to talk about. And this also goes into the end of this episode. So the episode ends off. Elves are decimated. There's maybe 20 of them left. Maybe that's generous. And they are just desolate, and they have to charge in. The orcs are coming in. The sun rises as the orcs are coming in. Gil-galad calls the troops. They head into battle. Again, cheer moment. I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. But something that Celebrimbor says is he kind of gives this little speech to Galadriel, and he reminds her that only the lightness can defeat the dark, is more or less summed up of what he says. And again, I think that really also is exemplified in that last scene when the sun rises. And to me, that really just hits a very core theme, I think, of Lord of the Rings, of Middle Earth, and that is that hope always is alive. Like, no matter how dark things are, there is always hope. There's a famous line from Gandalf in one of the movies where he says, there never was much hope, maybe just a fool's hope, right? So it's like, even if there's the slimmest chance, there's still hope. And I thought, again, they really hit that on the head with this scene with Celebrimbor, and again with the kind of final battle. And I just want to get your guys' thoughts on that. Do you guys feel like we ended on a kind of hopeful note, or are you guys like, damn, we're screwed? Zen, what do you think?
I feel like it's a little bit of both, man. Like, especially with Elrond, just so distraught over Durin not coming. Like, because I honestly
Oh
thought he was gonna
yes,
show
I
up.
didn't mention that. Yes, please bring that
Yeah,
up.
there's some looking like, yeah, he's coming. He's coming. But nah, for the most part, I feel like it's a little bit of both. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for where they go with the next episode. You know.
Ron, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Zen, I think you nailed it. It's this situation where like everything that could go wrong is going wrong at the moment, but through all of that, there is still, the sun still comes up again, sort of thing. Again, another visual representation, which the show does incredibly well. So I think it was meant to show that, there's just so much, Elrond feeling betrayed and the elves army being on their last legs, and we see what happens with Anatar and Celebrimbor at the end with all the elven guards, and how that's not looking like a very good situation for him right now. So just everything is going wrong.
All of them.
Big time. That was so cool. They like stab each other in a circle. Basically, that was so awesome.
Yes. Another great example, something we've been talking about, another just great example of Sauron's power. And we get great examples of this in this episode. And like, he's fully, again, the mask is off. Like, the illusion is gone. So he is using all of that godly power that he's got juiced up in his fingertips. And I don't know, man. Like you guys said, it feels bleak. But I mean, again, a lot of these characters have plot armor, so we know. Like, I'm assuming we're gonna end off on a relatively hopeful note. But I mean, I don't know. Things are bad. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Things are bad. And one very last note before we get off until to the end and the plugs and everything is when Celebrimbor is talking to Galadriel, he says that we're not powerful enough to beat Sauron. He's like, I don't know if anyone is, basically. And I just thought that was a really cool line because, again, we know in the movies, a freaking hobbit is the one who defeats him, someone who's not powerful at all. So again, I think that just adds to the whole kind of conversation of hope, right? Like, there was no hope in the original movies. They just had this halfling who no one thought was going to make it, and he did. And he's the one. Galadriel, the Valar could not defeat Sauron, but freaking Frodo did, our boy. So I thought that was a great, like I said, little Easter egg. And before we end off, I just want to ask you guys, we're headed into the last episode of this season. Hopes, any theories? What are you guys hoping from this last episode? Ron, you got something cooking for a theory, or again, just what you're hoping how this wraps up?
Not so much a theory, but there's two things that I think are going to be central to next week's episode. One is in the trailer. The Balrog will finally be released, so that's going to be chaos. Zen, I know you haven't seen the Lord of the Ring movies, but that's for movie fans and especially book fans, that's going to be a big moment. And it'll actually make things more enjoyable because I'm sure you're probably going to go back and watch the movies after this, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So it'll be, you're kind of doing things in reverse. I'm interested to see how you receive it, as opposed to, like me and TJ, who saw these movies all these years ago and kind of now are getting the Rings of Power. So that's really cool. But the Balrog, that's one I'm really excited for. And also we see in the trailer Sauron finally gets his helmet back. And I think what they're going to do is the last shot of the season is going to be him crafting the One Ring in Mordor. I don't know about timeline wise and how that adds up with source material, but they've also shown they're willing to shift things around and speed things up in this show. So I think knowing how the first season ended with him staring off, looking at Mount Doom on Mordor, I think the closing shot of this season is going to be him on Mount Doom in Mordor, crafting the ring. So those are the things I'm really hoping we get to see next week.
Dude, I would lose my freaking mind if that's what we get. Zen, what are you hoping for this final to wrapping up this season? We have, I'm sure, I don't mean to speak for you, but we've both really been enjoying this season. So how do you are you wrap? Because that's another thing to bring up is there's a lot of storylines still left to go. I mean, we did not meet up with the stranger at all this episode. We did not meet up with Isildur and all the other people over there, or Numenor. We didn't see Numenor either. So again, Zen, hopes for this last episode, and you think they'll be able to tie everything up?
Yeah, man. I'm expecting more action for sure. I feel like things are done with the battles. I'm also expecting to finally get more reveal with the stranger. We missed him this last episode, and I know the last time we seen him, he had a decision to make. You know what I mean? So I'm expecting to get more with him next episode. So those are things I'm looking forward to for sure.
We get a shot in the trailer for next episode of him finally talking to the Dark Wizard, and they're in this like weird realm looking thing. I couldn't even. I'll have to go back and see if I can identify it further, but it seems like we're finally going to get their face off, which is something that we've all been. Waiting
wow!
For.
Okay. Oh yeah, I'm excited for that. I'm excited.
Yeah, that's another thing. Honestly, before you said that, I kind of forgot about the Dark Wizard. He's taken a back seat these last couple episodes, so I'm excited for that too because I honestly forgot all about him. So I'm excited for that. I cannot be more excited for the end of the season. Again, we've been loving this, and I really think they're going to stick the landing. If this penultimate is any indication of how they're ending it off, I think we are in great hands. The future of Middle Earth, while it is dark in the show, it is very bright in real life. And that's going to be all we have for you guys for episode 7. Before we get out of here, Ron, thank you so much for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure. I want to throw it off to you real quick. Let the people know where can they find you, where are your other podcasts, so we can all go like and subscribe.
Thank you guys again for having me. It really was a blast. This hour has flown by. Like I looked up at the time and I was like, really? We've been talking for that long already? So
we could stay here for another good half hour.
I
had to cut us off because we could have easily talked about way more stuff.
Facts. But so I am at Jedi Genasi. You can see it right here on my name tag. On Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I am the host or co-host with my buddy Jordan of our show, The Fantasy Folk, where we also talk Rings of Power and Game of Thrones and all that other good stuff in the fantasy realm that we all love so much. We also have a Star Wars show, The Pod Awakens, and our Marvel show, To the Infinity Saga and Beyond. So a lot of stuff going on. I know it seems like a lot, but you can find the links for all of them in my Twitter bio. So just to make it easy, if you go to my Twitter, you give me a follow and check my bio, you'll be able to find all of our shows. And basically, whatever you're into, we got you covered.
I was going to say, you're covering every fandom there. And I got to say, Ron can rock the mic with the best of them. Definitely go like and subscribe to all of his channels because all the shows are absolutely great. My man Zen, Listen 3000, like, subscribe. I know we have more music coming. Caesar just teased it a little bit. You want to tell the people about that?
Nah, definitely. Of course, check out List 3000. We just dropped the episode maybe a few days ago. It's great. It was funny. Definitely follow us on all the socials and all that. And yeah, we got a new single. Caesar, my partner in List 3000, he's in a group called Forever. I help produce, and we're dropping a new single tomorrow. Well, I don't know when this is coming out, but it'll be out by the 27th. It comes out. It's called You Mad. Definitely check that out as well. So yeah.
Just followed you, so I'm excited.
Yes. Oh yeah, I'm right there, right behind you, bro.
Hell yeah.
Let's go. Everyone get your downloads ready, get your Spotify's, Apple Music, all that ready to go. And also, before we get out of here, be sure to tune in every Wednesday to our Agatha All Along live after show. We're going to be live every Wednesday right after Agatha. We have a great panel of guests lined up, so be sure to catch that. And also be sure to catch our Penguin after show on every Sunday right after the Penguin premieres. Again, great line of hosts, great line of guests. We had a really great time for the first episode with heavy spoilers. If you guys want to go check that out, all the breakdowns and Easter eggs. And obviously, you can catch us every Thursday. Well, I guess only one more Thursday for Fellowship of Fandom. It has been absolutely fantastic, and we will see you guys all next. Oh, and follow Agents of Fandom on everything.
Yes,
TikTok,
of
Instagram,
course.
Twitter. Agents Fandom on Twitter and TikTok, Agents of Fandom, basically everywhere else. Also, go and make sure to check out our site. We have some great reviews, articles, news, anything you need, we have you covered. Thanks so much, and we will see you guys next week for the last episode.